Hello, everyone. It's great to have you with us. My name's Lucia Labella, and I'm the Executive for Markets, Business and Private Bank here at NAB. I have a team of specialists in foreign exchange, interest rate risk management and commodities that are located across regional locations in Australia. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. So we're here today to launch the NAB Agribusiness Horizons report, and it's a data-led insights report looking at the impacts on regional and rural Australia. And so I'm joined here today by Khan Horn. He's the executive for NAB Regional and Agribusiness. He's located in regional New South Wales, and I have to say does the most kilometres I know of anyone at NAB in his car out visiting customers. So it's great to have you here with us today, Khan.
Great to be here.
And I'm also joined by Alan Oster, our chief economist. He's also from Newcastle, well, originally, and now also likes to travel and speak to customers. So it's great to have you both here launching this report with us today. So we're going to look at some highlights from the report. What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the challenges? And the so what's? And we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. We've actually gathered some of those questions that we've had at registration. So thank you to those that submitted questions. But there's 1,200 of you on the line, both either on a webinar, but also out in 55 locations across Australia. So thank you so much for taking the time to come out and meet with the NAB team out in your regional location. That's fantastic. So why don't we get into it? I'm going to start with you, Khan. Tell us a little bit about the Horizons report. What is it and why does NAB do it?
First of all, we do it because we've got a lot of economic information, but a lot of financial information around our deposits, our lending, where people are investing. So I like it because it tells us mega trends. Number two, I don't mind throwing, I won't say a party, but I don't mind throwing a function at Dubbo tonight or at Clare in South Australia because I believe in business networking. Now, back to the mega trends. I just looked at some of the mega trends. I think the cracking one I like, we saw a lot of migration and regional migration through COVID. But still, 11.7%. So I wouldn't have thought that in the last 12 months. It's well up pre-COVID levels. The second one is regional property valuations for dwellings up 45%. Like who would believe that type of valuation? So I think some of that megatrend data and talking to that megatrend is just good for discussions. Someone who's a capitalist, a business owner, talking to another business owner, or just thinking about what they're thinking for 25, 26 and planning their business.
Awesome. Thanks, Khan. Now, Alan, over to you. Let's kick off with a view about the global economy. Let's start there first.
Okay, so on the global economy, we're not that happy, basically, is the bottom line. There is a number of economies out there, particularly if you're in manufacturing. So if you're in Germany, Europe, UK, you're basically pretty close to a recession if you're not in one. And the normal average journalist definition of recession is 2 quarters of negative growth. Now, I actually think you're probably better off by looking at is unemployment up 1% in 12 months. But at the end of the day, though, you've got very weak activity in all the manufacturing sectors. You've got a situation. The US is the exception. It's doing better, but a lot of that has been fiscal policy, which is now reversing. And so we think the US is going to slow. The big sort of picture issue, though, is as these economies slow, then you're going to have central banks who are going to be cutting rates. Most of them, I think, will probably start in the middle of the year. So the Fed, Canada, ECB, Australia, I think, is more likely to be about November, as is New Zealand. So it's a world that is not really going to help us. And in simple language, outside of COVID or essentially what happened during the global financial crisis, this is the worst global world since 2002. It's not going to help us that much. Hopefully, as we go on, it'll get better the year after.
Okay, now why don't we shift closer to home? Let's shift to the Australian market and what do you see happening here in Australia?
Okay, so you have to be honest and say they've increased policy, increased interest rates, and it's having an impact. So the consumers are basically worried about how they're going to juggle their income and their interest payments and how they're going to meet their cost of living. We sort of see it also that when we're looking at things like our business surveys and our data, the economy is sort of okay, but there's some areas that are stressed. And so we see a lot of stress in retail, we see it in wholesale, and increasingly we're seeing it in construction. But against that, transport, services, hospitality is still pretty strong. So the economy's all right. When we look at where do we think the economy's going, I think in the next 6 months, not very far. It's basically going to be pretty flat. Then by the middle of the year, you're hopefully going to get, well, you get your tax cuts, you'll get something in the budget, you'll be close to rate cuts. And so I think it will start to improve from there on. What it means though, is if the economy grows at say 1.5, 1 3/4 during the course of this year, that doesn't generate enough jobs to keep unemployment where it is. And so we sort of see that you need 40,000 jobs per month to keep unemployment stable. We're getting 20,000. So we have 4.5% for unemployment by the end of the year. And so that's not great, but it's also at a reasonable level. We see inflation coming down. It won't all go straight down. We've got issues in the service sector in particular, where essentially, health, education, those prices are not coming down. Our central bank governor got into trouble for saying haircuts don't come down. Same sort of story. But if you're talking about supply chain, it is coming down. So by the end of the year, we could see the core inflation rates at around 3, and then about 2.5 the year after, which is where the Reserve Bank's aiming to get it. And so when we look at all that, what do we think? We think on interest rates, they're going to take a while. They're going to need to be convinced. And that's a story you're seeing overseas as well. But I think by the end of the year, there'll be more focus on consumers and unemployment. And so that's when they're going to start cutting. So our view would be that's when they start. Now, if unemployment gets worse as we go through the course of the year, then they'll come earlier. And markets have got it in August, September, we think maybe November. Next year, you'll get a lot of rate cuts. And so we expect at least 100 basis points of cuts. That will get our cash rate down to about 3. And we think a cash rate around 3 is roughly neutral. Why? Because you normally have, in a fundamental sense, a real rate that's positive. So if inflation is 2.5, you want something a little bit higher. So let's do it 3 and a bit. Yeah, is sort of story. So near term, bit of a problem. Next year, I think it's going to look a lot better. And so what you're seeing is, if we're all right, so the government's right, we're right, the Reserve Bank's right, they're all got the same sort of forecasts. We all use the same models. But anyway, you've got growth 2.5. You've got inflation basically back in the target. You've got unemployment, hopefully with a 4 in front of it still. And you've got a cash rate that we think is neutral. Very few countries in the world will be able to say that. And so I actually think, yes, we've got a policy slowdown. Yes, it's going to hurt for a while. But next year looks really good. And people should think about that, about how they can plan as they go forward.
Now, if we think about that outlook further, you're saying medium term's looking good. That 24, 25, what are some of those positive opportunities that customers should capitalize on?
Well, I think you should be using the period now to think about how would you increase production in a flexible way during the course of the year. So, for me, it's how do you place yourself to pick up this sort of growth momentum? So business investment, how do you do that? And also generally just be flexible because, something like COVID might come along again and we're all wrong again.
Don't say that on.
But no, but geopolitical risk, who knows?
Yep.
So those sort of issues are big.
Absolutely.
We always have a black swan event.
Yeah.
A couple of years, you never know which
That's
one
right.
it's going to be.
You never know what it is.
So, when we looked at the data, and I read the report earlier this week, the NAB economics team surveyed intentions to move to regional Australia. And an interesting statistic is around 1 in 10, so about 11% of those surveyed intended on still moving into regional Australia. So that allure of moving, that sea change, tree change that many people spoke about of COVID, still there, and there's intentions to do that. And then if we look at, you spoke to that 45.9%, Khan, around, that growth in the property market in rural Australia, which is just phenomenal if you think about that growth. It's still up 4.4% in 2023. But the flip side of that is then what's happening on the rental market. And we still have rental availability for the second year in a row under 1%. And as a rural business, trying to attract labour and finding housing is a really difficult component of this report. And so that does highlight, the pros and cons of strong property market, but then also that, availability of rent. So Khan, if we think about investment, cash flow trends,
Yep.
What are some of the things that our customers need to be thinking about that highlight in this report?
Oh, look, the first one, back to your original point before I answer that question, will be it is great for those customers who are in the market. So, but it is a challenge for young workers, the first home, through the trade, just after school, just finished university, moved the country. So there's no two words about it. I think the trends I've seen, there's a couple. Look, I often use both lending and deposit as a barometer. So look, we saw transport up 10%, agriculture, construction, accommodation, all desiring credit over 5%. So that's pretty good demand. And then I think the other piece will be, we saw appetite for vehicles up 10%. Just Tasmania was up 37%. So all of a sudden you see something which is way out of out of whack, which was good. On deposits, we saw deposits grow, about 8%, even though the cash rate was only 4%. So, and with that, our agricultural book grew their farm management deposits up 27%. In WA, off the back of the previous year, not last year, the previous year's up 48% growth. So there was a lot of cash splashing around the system. So I think that's it's good for the economy. It's good for certain sectors when you go back and say, well, if I'm in New South Queensland, it's good on the WA guys, but it wasn't here. But I think the growth across Australia was pretty good for farmers deposits.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for that. Khan, you obviously drive around a lot and spend a lot of time with customers. What's something that you'd like to leave them as a message around something they need to be thinking about in terms of their business operations?
Well, there's a couple of key messages. First of all, we're open for business. So if you've got a business idea, if you've got a business opportunity, don't sit on it and dwell it too long. Bring up your banker, bring up your regional manager, and book some time to have a chat to put this proposition. And sometimes it might be a verbal chat, sometimes it might be a full business plan. I think in terms of risks, but we spoke about interest rates, and interest rates have been a big risk last 12 months, 18 months, Alan, but we had a period where interest rates weren't being discussed because they were just so low. And as I say, BBSY 440, 90 days now, it's a flat curve around that period and actually decreasing curve on the other end of it. But I think the point there will be the risk I'm seeing, which we don't talk about that much, is cyber. There's been lots of discussion around cyber, but it's not just the cyber criminal pretending to be son of a prince somewhere, etc. It is so good now. So the investment scams I've seen people remit funds, they just they look like a business. We're still seeing invoice fraud. We're still seeing CEO, CFO, personal details being stolen, and really the fraud keeps me awake. There wouldn't be one week I don't go without seeing that. I think the other risk will be, it is hard, as we spoke about the housing, I suppose, shortage. We had 600,000 people immigrated. We've got a lot of internal migration. But I think I've just seen a lot of people see that, and if they're a commercial entity, they can actually. I've seen hotels being bought for accommodation, caravan parks, motels, ex-hostels. I've just seen seriously big camps for people to house their pickers or their meat processors. So lots of ideas, but I think acquiring resources, people, and talent, retaining them, and actually having a good, steady, reliable workforce has been one of the biggest challenges. But most of our customers have got that nailed. But in summary, interest rates are always going to be there. Bit of Aussie we spoke earlier, but cybercrime just keeps me awake. That's the one it's really hard to make money, but to give it away to criminals, not in Australia, it just breaks my heart every day. And thirdly, just that human resource factor.
Yeah, you make a really good point around customer diversification when there's issues, and in regional and agribusiness, our customers are really resilient and come up with ways to get past issues, whether it's weather related, whether it's resourcing, labour related. But one thing actually we didn't touch on, Alan, I'd like to go back to is the Aussie and the US
Yep,
dollar. We
yep.
have lots of importers and exporters
Yep,
on the line.
yep.
The US dollar is the major currency most of them trade in. What's your views there in terms of what that looks like going forward?
Well, first a disclaimer, if I knew exactly where the currency was going to be, I would have retired a long time ago. All right, so our model, basically what's happening is the US economy has outperformed everybody else. And so people are saying, oh, the Fed might not be, well, one stage they were saying the Fed's going to go April, May.
Mhm.
Now they're out to June. And the economy has surprised. So everyone likes to hold the US dollar. Our models say it's worth 68, it's like 66 today. But what we're expecting is this slowdown in the US is actually starting to happen. And so the Fed will be cutting before we will be cutting. And so we would see the Australian dollar going back up to where it probably should be. So let's say 70 cents or thereabouts by the end of the year and mid 70s by next year. But again, as Carm was saying, you always get the black swan event. But at this stage, we would sort of try and say the Australian dollar should go back up because if nothing else, if I go back to what I was saying about 25, Australian economy is going to look a great place to invest, to employ, and live. And so for me, I'm quite optimistic about the Australian dollar in the medium term, but in the short term, and then don't ask me about Trump, right?
I was about to go there, Alan. So you just got me before that.
Yeah.
There are obviously and that's an element to think
Yeah.
about in terms of there is the US election, November, that is, and that can have an impact on what happens to the US dollar. We did see that last time. Obviously, Trump came into power, but it's more around, it's just a forecast. There are multi factors that go into that forecast, and it should just be one element of your business decision making. If you're looking at your budgeting and forecasting coming into June period, especially, a lot of our customers can't look at that budget rate.
Absolutely.
Speaking to a specialist going into that time period, understanding the forecast, but then also working out, where's the cost base need to be so that you can make a margin after all your hard work. There are pros and cons, and making sure that you understand what the risks are to that forecast is really important.
Yeah. Can I just say, we're talking very much about the Australian dollar. Those risks are there on all the macro forecasts.
Yeah.
And so, we don't try and say what's going to happen in China and Taiwan, etc. We'll run a stress test if we have to on that. But we just say, based on what we know what's going to happen, that fundamentally is what we say. But be aware these risks are out there, and geopolitical risk is big. And we saw what Russia did to the wheat price, for example. So
absolutely. Well, I think now we're going to move to a bit of Q&A. So as I mentioned at the start, we've themed together a few pieces that have come out in the registrations. And so one of the first ones, Khan, I'd like to talk to that's come out from Launceston in Tasmania is what needs to be done to ensure that regional Australia capitalises on the growth opportunities that we're facing into FY24.
Well, first of all, there's lots of migration. That double-digit migration is coming and going. There's some hotter locations for migration. So first thing is just make sure, we really have, I suppose, land developments, and we're welcoming, and we just make sure that this migration mightn't be there, but it's occurring. So I think the second piece would be really around, if you are positioning yourself for growth, have a good advisor. So have a good accountant, have a valuation for your assets if you wish to pledge for security, have a good solicitor, but get to know your bank manager. So I've got this idea, I've got this information, I wish to put this proposal forward, make sense to you, and then formulate. So I think, and that really is around, having good financial records, your balance sheet, P&L, forward cash flow, a bit of a business plan, articulating who you are if we don't know you that well. And then finally, if you're a AAA rated customer, so you've got a good account conduct, you've got good financial background, etc., just sell that one. So really having a strong business model and portraying to the bank so you can go in funded.
One of the themes actually that came out in the report, which we haven't touched on, and is, something a few of our customers have asked us, is around carbon and sustainability.
Yep.
So, for both of you, in terms of, it's difficult as a rural business, and you're, on your own trying to work through what does that mean for me in true terms on a daily basis. can either of you shed some light on what should our customers be thinking about in terms of carbon and sustainability?
Yeah, I'll kick off and then I'll probably come from a macro view. So effectively, yeah, we never tell a client how to run their business at all. However, we do know that some decarbonisation targets are coming. We're meeting lots of different industry bodies. We're understanding it. And so first of all, you know, we do have some green loans. So green equipment finance, green lending, where you've got to qualify by having the, and I just went through the data earlier, and we're doing, you know, did 45 last month. We're doing a lot of electric vehicles, but we're doing things I didn't know there was electric forklifts and LED. I knew there's LED lights, of course, but we're doing lots of batteries, lots of solar. So some obvious, some not so obvious. Like I didn't know there was electric trucks and buses driving in Australia, but there are. So we're funding them. So that's the first piece. Second piece, you know, is understanding what your carbon footprint is. So there's tools you can have to measure it. We're not experts. We're bankers. We're not experts in it, but understanding and measuring your carbon. So if you do, you get your baseline in 24, 25, and then you can articulate, how do I, you know, as a family, as a business, as an industry, as a town, a village, whatever, what are my plans to actually, you know, either plan to reduce if you are in a high emitter, plan to actually understand and maintain if you don't have a target you're within, but realistically there'll be some industries will have to reduce. And so I think just understanding where you are, your baseline, and plans to get through that, because we all want to leave, you know, Mother Earth in a better place than we found it.
Yeah.
Just a general comment. Australia needs to have a competitive energy cost base, and increasingly that's renewables or alternatives. However, Australia also has a very large fossil fuel system. And I think what you've got to do is manage it. You can't just say, right, I'm going to cut off fossil fuels tomorrow. Of course, it will kill us. Doesn't hurt Europe because they don't have any. So I think you've just got to stage it and think about how can we get to where we need to be and do it effectively competitively. Because, you know, you think about it, to get electricity out of coal, building a new plant doesn't work in the current environment. You can probably be competitive if you've already built the plant. But so what you've got to do is look for the alternatives as you go forward, but don't be silly in terms of closing it if you don't work out.
So really that planning element, you know, like with everything, like you said before, that forecast, having discussions, bringing your banker in, we can help you and assist with tools to make that measurement component in terms of support there, but just having a plan in place and working towards something in a sustainable way. Another one from Wangaratta in Victoria, so where I'm living at the moment in Victoria, how can growth in regional business occur where there is limited regional housing available? And you did touch on this a little bit earlier, but maybe expand on what that actually means for our client base.
Oh, look, yeah, that's a very difficult one, because we're not, the bank doesn't solve housing, but, you know, we are working with lots of customers who are opening up developments or planning and having stage 1, 2, 3, 4 funded. So I think engage a banker early. You know, we don't go around lobbying governments, etc., for different divisions, but engage us so we can actually understand what's being proposed, and especially if you've got track record, it's easy. I think the second one is just, you know, talk about your business model, the demographics nicely. I think some of this data around having regional migration make some of these projects easier, and then thirdly, don't bypass a plan if you're saying, oh, I might, you know, put in $50 and I'm going to house X number of people. Yeah, we're funding those type of projects, Lucia. We're doing lots of, as I said before, you know, we have funded X caravan park for tourism, now for housing stuff. So I think housing can be a multitude of aspects for business owners to step in and what's the word for it? House their own staff. We can actually step in there and help developers develop, you know, in Globo and, you know, 50 housing blocks out, you know, next 2 years, 5 years, etc. So that's what we do day in, day out. So that's our job, is to really understand the different markets and look, you know, sometimes it's hard to predict where, you know, Wangaratta's going to be in 5 years, but we had the CRD just before Christmas, and, you know, I know the team up there does a great job, and that's the economy I'd back every day of the week. So I think just being a good bank and being a good bank is what we've got to do, but what the customer's got to do is really articulate their story, give us good business plans, have good financial information. I can't, have your account with us, trade through us, and just give us good information. It makes the job so much easier.
Just in summary, we've got a lot of questions about interest rates.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
you know, Alan, you did speak a lot about interest rates, but I think just, you know, I'll summarize and you add, we've spoken about that your neutral cash rate around 3 to 3.5. So that's really important for customers to understand. It's not back to the levels that we've had pre-hiking that's been going on.
Yep.
So understanding that that's where neutral cash will get to. The house forecast at the moment is around November in Australia, where the RBA is looking to cut. But I think one of the things to also understand is where we used to have live meetings every month, first Tuesday of the month, which was easy to remember. We've now moved to 8 sessions a year, with the next one being next week. So let's wait and see what data comes out there. I encourage all of you, if you don't, to download the podcast of the morning call that our team sends out every morning. It's a great, you know, little snapshot of what's happening in the market. But there are risks to, you know, when the RBA might cut. Anything else that you want to add, Alan, there to finish off the rates piece?
On the rates, I think it's really important to understand that the Reserve Bank is not trying to crash the economy. They're trying to do a fine judgment. So we're best part of 1% below, 1.25% below New Zealand and essentially the Fed. But so they're going to be very careful. They're going to be looking at the data incredibly hard. If I can go back to what Khan was saying, one of the things about rents, it means it's not just the mortgage belt that's in trouble at present. We find, in fact, in all our data, that the rents are killing people at the bottom end of the income distribution. And that's a big issue. So that with population, it will slow. Because they're sort of what's happened essentially in the population increases were that we had about 500,000 students every year come in, and then for the last 3 years they sort of didn't come in and they're not leaving. So normally what happened, 500 come in, 300 leave.
Yep.
And so you get 200. Just at present we've got 5 coming in and no one's
leaving.
leaving.
Yeah.
But naturally that will come down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will help a bit to ease the rental side.
Right.
But yeah, so interest rates, the RBA is looking at a combination of consumers, and if they really fall over big time, which we hope they don't, then they'll come earlier, and they're also looking at inflation. So you've got to judge those two.
And Khan, just before I wrap up, any final message you'd love to leave the customers with tonight?
Yeah, I think, look, first of all, thanks for the team putting this together. We've got a wealth of information. Alan was touching on earlier, we do see not just deposits and lending, but we see our merchant services. Like we saw this massive uptick around discretionary income when the Swifties were spending. We did. Yeah. So I think, if you're after information, we've got the morning call. We're open for business, Latuya. It's just great to be here and just, if you've got any ideas, just ring your banker, knock on the door at your various business banking centres. We're open for business just to say good day and listen to your proposal. So I just want to say thanks for the customer and great to be here.
Well, thanks to both of you for joining us tonight. I've really enjoyed the conversation. But if you'd like to download the report, it's on nab.com.au/insights. Thank you so much to everyone joining online and out in your regional locations. We look forward to seeing you again soon.